I'll never forget the moment I learned the truth. My own father stood in front of the family, his voice cold and final, and said I was dead to him. My name, Agatha Winslow, was erased from his house that night. And 2 years later, when my brother's wedding came, the invitations went to everyone in town, except me. The morning started like any other. I set the kettle on the stove, poured coffee into the chipped mug I'd carried through too many years, and tried to steady myself for another long day ahead. Seattle's gray light pressed against the blinds, a kind of silence that usually calmed me. But that peace cracked the moment my phone lit up. "Are you flying to Tahoe this weekend?" The voice on the other end was bright, casual, an old friend checking in. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard. "Your brother's wedding," she added, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. My hand went cold around the mug. No envelope had come to my mailbox. No email, no text from home, nothing. I managed a thin reply before ending the call, though my voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. The silence afterward was crushing. It wasn't just about missing an invitation. It was proof, sharp and undeniable, that I had been cut out completely. My chest tightened as I stood in my tiny kitchen, the phone heavy in my hand, the coffee cooling untouched. Memories surfaced unbidden. My father's booming laugh at community fundraisers, the glow of our family name plastered on hospital wings. The Winslow reputation had been ironclad, until I uncovered the truth. Money siphoned from the very foundation meant to heal people. I couldn't keep quiet, and when I spoke up, the auditors listened. My father never forgave me for it. He called it betrayal. I called it survival of our integrity. His verdict was exile. I set the phone down and drifted toward the bookshelf, where a faded photo sat in its frame. 2 kids at a county fair, powdered sugar on our faces, my brother's hand tugging mine. My throat tightened. No invitation would change what we were. I whispered to the silence, steady this time. Even if no one wanted me there, I would show up. The Winslow name had once meant something in the Pacific Northwest. Our family funded scholarships, attached our crest to hospital wings, and cut ribbons at nursing homes where the cameras always lingered. People spoke our name with a kind of reverence, as if we'd carved out a legacy of healing and service that would last forever. But behind the polished speeches and smiling photographs, another truth festered. My father funneled money away from the very foundation meant to serve the sick and the poor, pouring it instead into his private real estate ventures. I hadn't gone looking for it. I stumbled across the paper trail while working alongside a community hospital we were supposed to support. Numbers that should have added up to lives saved ended up leading to beachfront property. When I reported it, the auditors acted swiftly, and the community whispered my name with respect. Integrity, they called it. My father called it treason. At Christmas dinner that year, with the tree lit and cousins passing plates of pecan pie, he leaned across the table and stared into me with steel in his eyes. His voice was calm enough to slice clean. "You're no longer part of this family." The room froze. My brother dropped his gaze to his lap. My mother twisted a napkin between her fingers, but said nothing. Aunts and uncles chewed in silence, as if swallowing words too dangerous to speak. In that moment, I understood what exile felt like. Not absence, but presence erased. Later that night, I pulled out an old photograph. 2 children at a schoolyard, my arm thrown across my brother's shoulders, daring the bullies to touch him. My chest ached. That memory was now buried under silence so heavy it could crush bone. And so, when the wedding invitation never came, I knew it wasn't an oversight. It was the final nail in a coffin built 2 years earlier, hammered in plain view of everyone who had chosen not to stop it. Through all of it, there was one steady presence who never flinched. John Mercer. To most, he was a name spoken in hushed tones, a Navy SEAL who had earned the call sign, the Ghost. To me, he was simply the man who had once asked, on a quiet evening porch, rain falling in soft sheets, "Marry me, Agatha," No speech, no diamond flash, just a promise carved into the stillness. When I told him about the wedding, about the missing invitation, he didn't curse on my behalf or feed the anger I tried so hard to keep down. He only said, steady as ever, "We'll go, not to fight, just to stand there, together." His certainty anchored me when everything else felt like shifting sand. I gathered what I had into a slim folder: receipts, letters, pieces of truth too sharp to be ignored. While clearing out my grandmother's cedar chest, I found something I wasn't looking for: a sealed envelope, edges yellowed with time. Her handwriting marched across the front in blocky strokes. "Read only when all my grandchildren are present at a wedding." My hands trembled as I held it. If I stayed away, the envelope would remain sealed forever. But if I walked into that garden in Tahoe, no matter who tried to stop me, the condition would be met. I slipped the envelope into the folder, pressing it between other pages of proof. My heart pounded with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about showing up anymore. This was about forcing the truth into the light. And as I closed the folder, one thought rang louder than fear itself. This letter would be the key to making my father face what he had spent years burying. The resort shimmered under strings of lights, a picture-perfect stage set against the still blue of the lake. Guests in gowns and tuxedos drifted across the manicured lawns, a string quartet coaxing soft notes into the summer air. From a distance, it looked like a dream. Up close, it felt like a wall. John and I walked toward the main entrance, the crunch of gravel beneath our steps drawing a few glances. At the gate, a security man in a sharp black suit scanned his clipboard, then shook his head without looking up. "Your name isn't on the list." Before I could answer, a familiar shadow fell across us. My father's voice cut through the music, colder than the lake water at dawn. "I told you before, traitors don't have a place here." His eyes didn't blink, his jaw tight enough to crack stone. The crowd nearest us quieted. Conversations faltered. I could feel whispers ripple through the guests, their curiosity sharpening into judgment. What had been a family wound was now bleeding out under chandeliers and champagne flutes. John stepped forward, shoulders loose, his presence almost too calm for the moment. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words landed like iron dropped on marble. "The ghost doesn't ask twice." The guard froze, his eyes darting between my father and John. Even the quartet stumbled, bowstrings hovering midair. My father's face locked hard, then cracked. He gave a single, bitter nod. John's hand found mine. Together, we crossed the threshold, the hush of the crowd following us like a shadow. I slipped into a seat near the side aisle, my pulse still loud in my ears. My mother leaned close, her voice a tremor. "You shouldn't be here, but I'm glad you came." Her fingers brushed mine for an instant before retreating. Ahead of us, my father sat stiff, his shoulders squared as if bracing a storm. Midway through the ceremony, he rose, glass in hand, and let his words slice the air. "The Winslow family stands together, except those who've betrayed it." A ripple of nods traveled through the audience, polite and automatic, but more than a few eyes turned toward me. Then came the unexpected. Someone called my name, inviting me to speak. The hum of speculation rose immediately, neighbors muttering, "She'll make a scene." I stood, every eye locking on me, and for a moment the weight nearly buckled my knees. I didn't speak of audits or foundations or betrayal. Instead, I turned to my brother, the groom, and let a memory rise. When I was 10, my bike chain snapped. He didn't know a wrench from a hammer, but he worked for an hour just so I could ride again. That's the brother I know, the one who fixes what's broken, no matter how long it takes. Silence followed, thick and unexpected. Then a single clap, then another, until applause rolled across the lawn. My brother blinked hard, eyes shining, the bride's expression softening beside him. But the moment shifted again. An older man, frail yet steady, stood near the back. His voice shook, but it carried. If not for Agatha's actions 2 years ago, my hospital would have closed. Dozens of patients would have had nowhere to go. The murmurs swelled, turning sharp. Faces swiveled toward my father. The mask of his certainty began to slip. I returned to my seat, fingers locked around the folder in my lap. The storm had broken, and I knew it was only the beginning. The lawn glittered with golden lights strung through the pines, the lake throwing back reflections like glass. Jazz drifted over the tables as waiters poured wine into tall-stemmed glasses. Laughter bubbled in pockets. But when my father rose again with his glass, the music seemed to thin. "The Winslow family stands together," he declared, his eyes cutting toward me. "And anyone who forgets honor will never have a seat at this table." The words hung sharp in the night air, and the easy chatter faltered. My brother flicked his eyes toward me, then quickly away, his smile tightening as though the weight of silence pressed on him. My mother bowed her head, hands folded, lips sealed, even in a crowd of 200. I felt the same isolation I'd carried since the night I was cast out. I glanced down at the folder in my lap. My thumb brushed over the sunflower card, the audit letter, the sealed envelope I hadn't dared to open. Every page was a blade, waiting to cut if needed. One of my father's oldest investors drifted over, jovial and flushed with wine. He clinked his glass to mine and asked loudly, "Agatha, you still working with those little hospitals? Folks still talk about you." His words lit a spark, heads tilting, whispers swelling like wind through dry grass. The laughter didn't return. Eyes turned toward our table, and the space around my father grew heavy. His knuckles whitened around the stem of his glass, veins rising against skin as if the pressure alone might hold the night together. Before my father could reclaim the room, the officiating pastor stepped into the glow of the lanterns, a worn envelope in his hand. His voice carried steady, deliberate. This was entrusted to me by the family matriarch. It was to be opened only when all her grandchildren were present at a wedding. The entire gathering stilled, my father's face drained of color. He half lifted a hand as though to object, but it was too late. I was there, and the condition was met. The pastor slid a finger under the flap and unfolded the fragile paper. His words cut deeper than any toast. "Honor without love is brittle. Love without honor is cheap. Never call service to the community betrayal. That is honor in motion." Then came the line that turned the ground beneath us. "I entrust Agatha Winslow with the stewardship of the Winslow Integrity Fund, a scholarship for those who labor to heal and to build." A murmur rolled through the guests, then a gasp, then a low swell of approval. Faces turned toward me, not with suspicion this time, but with something startling, respect. My mother reached under the table, her palm pressing mine, her eyes shining. My father remained frozen, his jaw slack. The speech he'd prepared shattered in his throat. My brother rose from his chair before he realized he'd moved. He crossed the few steps to my side, leaned in, and whispered, voice thick, "You should have always been here." The pastor folded the letter, but its echo filled the night. What had begun as my father's theater of control now cracked wide open, the weight of a grandmother's truth pressing down, leaving him cornered by family and watched by the very community he once commanded. The reception had dimmed into uneasy quiet after the letter was read, the glow of lanterns still shimmering against the lake, but the music little more than background noise. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Laughter had dried into nervous coughs. It felt as though the entire room was waiting for the next crack to split the night open. It came without warning. A man in a tailored suit, one of my father's longtime business partners, rose from his seat with deliberate calm. He set a folded paper on the head table, the rustle of it sharp in the silence. His voice carried across the lawn. "This email was forwarded to me weeks ago. Per instruction of the bride's father, revoke RSVP access for Agatha Winslow." The air snapped. A wave of murmurs spread like fire through dry brush. My brother's face blanched, his bride's hand flying to her mouth. My mother pressed her palm against her chest, color draining until she looked as pale as her pearls. Then the whispers sharpened into suspicion. At one table, I heard the hiss of doubt. If he intercepted her invitation, what else has he covered up? Another voice answered, low but firm. If he can erase his own daughter, what's he hiding in the books? The final blow landed from across the aisle. A benefactor leaned forward, his tone cutting. If the Winslow Foundation can't prove transparency, my company withdraws support. Chairs creaked, voices rising in agreement. The chorus of discontent grew louder, splintering the order my father had built. He gripped his glass so tightly it trembled, amber liquid sloshing over the rim. Then, with a sudden crack, he slammed it down, shards scattering like sparks. Rage flushed his face as he shoved back his chair and stormed out into the dark, leaving the reception in chaos. I stayed seated, my folder resting heavy on my lap, watching him disappear into the night. My pulse steadied with one thought alone. This reckoning had only just begun. The night air off Lake Tahoe carried a sharp edge, the kind that cut straight through silk dresses and stiff collars. Lantern light from the reception flickered weakly behind us, but out on the deck the world was only wind, water, and my father's rigid back. He gripped the railing so hard his knuckles looked bone-white against the dark wood. Waves licked the rocks below, steady and merciless. I stepped forward, the crunch of my shoes on the planks breaking the silence. John followed but held back just far enough, a quiet anchor at my shoulder. My father didn't turn. His voice came rough, low, as if dragged up from stone. You made me small in front of the whole town. My throat tightened, but I forced my words steady. I didn't make you small. The truth only stripped away the pride you built on lies. For a long beat, only the water answered us. Then he exhaled through his teeth, shoulders sagging. I stopped your invitation. I couldn't bear it. Your name whispered with respect while mine carried doubt. Better they forget you than watch me fall. The confession stung less than I expected. Maybe because I had known it all along. I drew a breath. Let it steady me. If you want your family back, you'll have to earn it. You apologize in front of everyone. You clean the foundation, make it transparent, and you honor Grandma's wish. Start the scholarship. Behind me, John spoke, his tone like iron under gravel. Pride doesn't keep families alive. Truth does. His words hung in the air, heavier than the wind, impossible to ignore. My father finally turned. His eyes, so often hard, glistened with tears he refused to let fall. For once, there was no speech, no defense, only a broken whisper. All right, I'll do it. And in that moment, the storm inside me eased, though I knew the reckoning had only just begun. When my father stepped back into the reception hall, the band faltered mid-song. Glasses froze in mid-air. Conversations cut short. Every eye turned toward him as he walked slowly to the head table. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, yet his presence carried the weight of what was about to come. He gripped the microphone with both hands, voice rough but steady enough to reach every corner of the room. I was wrong, he said. The words landed like stones in water, sending ripples through the silence. I blocked my daughter's invitation. I called her a traitor. But the truth is, I betrayed the trust of my family, and of this community. Gasps whispered around the tables, but he pressed on, breath-catching. Tonight, I promise change. The Winslow Integrity Fund will be established, just as my mother wished. It will be open, transparent, and it will not be mine to control. Agatha will lead it. His gaze found mine then, holding, as though those words were less an announcement than a surrender. The room held still for a long moment. Then, a lone pair of hands clapped, hesitant. Another followed. The sound grew, one voice after another, until the applause rolled like thunder under the lanterns. Not jubilation, but relief. The town had witnessed a man bend where once he only broke. 2 months later. The college auditorium smelled faintly of chalk and fresh paint. Students and parents filled the rows, eyes bright with hope. My father stood at the podium, older, humbled, but clear. This is my daughter, Agatha Winslow, he said, his voice carrying across the hall. The audience applauded again, this time without hesitation. Standing beside John, I felt the wind lift the flag outside, its fabric cracking like a promise kept. My grandmother's words echoed through me as steady as my own heartbeat. Honor with love endures.